Well, and I think, you know, the fact is that the two parties have certainly differences, and we're seeing that by the huge amounts of spending that are taking place right now. But the fact is that when we come together around bills, we do things that really can stand the test of time. And when we do that, it's not about a political victory. It's about us pushing, airing our differences, and seeing those places where we have common ground. I remember almost every one of us, I've watched each of you in your deliberations here on the floor, and I know that very early on we talked about the fact that if we could just focus on the 80% that we agree upon, we could pass a piece of legislation that would stand the test of time. And maybe it didn't solve every problem in the world. Maybe it didn't go from end zone to end zone, but maybe we went 50 yards down the field, but it was a 50 yards of solid gain for the American people, something that would stand the test of time. And then we could come back and maybe get other pieces of it as we moved along. But I know that almost everyone in this room has been a part of discussions to increase access, increase competitiveness, to drive down cost, to increase choices. And I want to say that this may be historic if it passes. I actually still believe that there's a great chance that some of our friends on the other side of the aisle will realize that this is historic. And what's historic about it is this: if we pass this bill, or if the Senate passes this bill, we will have missed an historic opportunity to work together and do something that will stand the test of time. All the energy would have been expended on a bill that does not pass the common sense test, where the basic fundamentals are flawed. And what will happen is this issue won't come up again for a long time, because I know how the calendar here on the floor is, and I certainly know about the patience of the American people. But the history part of this is we will have missed an historic opportunity to do something that will be good for the American people. And that's the part that I guess bothers me the most.
Well, Senator, just to yield for a minute, Senator's been a mayor of a good-sized city. Senator's been a small business person, actually probably bigger than small business person. But if you were running a business and you're in an environment like we're in today, you've got a tough economy, trying to figure out ways to cut back on your costs and figure out a way to sell a little more of whatever it is that you're making or doing. And somebody comes to you and says, we're going to reform health care, and we want to do something that actually will get your health care costs down. And yet what they're selling is going to raise your taxes. And according to the referees, and as I said earlier, the actuary for the Center for Medicare Services is sort of the referee in all this. They don't have a political agenda or a political objective. They simply want to get the facts out. And of course, that's the role that's played traditionally here in Congress by the Congressional Budget Office, both of whom now say, the CBO says that it's going to increase health care spending by $160 billion over the first 10 years. And the CMS actuary is now saying it's going to increase health care costs by $234 billion over the first 10 years. And you also have now the CMS actuary saying that it could close 20% of the hospitals, that 17 million people who get their insurance through their employer are going to lose it, that the Medicare cuts are not sustainable on a permanent basis in this legislation, and that most of a lot of these tax increases and whatnot are going to be passed on in the form of higher premiums, which are mainly going to be borne by people who are trying to provide insurance to their employees. If you're sitting there as a business person, and you've been there, and you're looking at that balance sheet and you're looking at that income statement, and somebody is trying to sell you on an idea about health care reform that has the features I just mentioned, how do you react to something like that? I mean, I see what small business organizations are saying, but you've been there. Tell me how you view it.
I just met with a businessman in Tennessee on one of my more recent trips, and they have an annual payroll of $4.2 million their health care costs are $4.2 million a year for their employees. And they file their tax return as a sub-S company. And so the income from the company actually ends up being attributed to the partners. And so when they file an income tax return, they don't take the money out of the company. They leave the money in to invest, make sure that it's productive, and they have jobs for other people, but that income is attributed to them. So he was showing me what this bill did to them. First of all, their percentage of health care cost is 12% of their payroll. And so he's way above the minimums that this bill has said. You have to be, I think it's 7% or something like that. By the time he looked at the taxes that were going to be assessed to them, because they filed, in other words, against their individual income, even though the money stayed within the company itself, what he was saying is, this means not only will we not hire any additional employees, we're not going to do that, but in addition to that, we're going to seriously look at just dropping our health care plan and paying the penalties that come with this bill. And I will say this, I do fear, one of the things that people do when they see that the government, a lot of companies in this country do things because they think it's the right thing to do. But a lot of companies, when they see government sort of mandating what they have to do, or if they don't do that, there's an option for them just to opt out and pay a penalty. When they feel like the government is being intrusive, sometimes they just decide, look, I'm not going to do this anymore. And so what I would say to answer your question is, number one, it puts, you end up depressing people's wages when you have these huge increases, because at the end of the day, you've got to have a profit at the end to operate. You discourage people who are trying to do the right thing. You tax people at a level that, because of the way our taxation system works, takes money out of the company, which again is used for productive good to hire employees. And so what I would say, at the very time when we're trying to create jobs, and I know you've been out here a great deal talking about the fact that we need to create jobs in this country, we have legislation. This legislation that is before us is a job killer. And the uncertainty of American companies about health care, and then the fiscal issues, and then this whole notion of cap and trade is in fact what resoundingly people across this country are saying is keeping them
With the Senator
people.
Yield, I hear, and I know my colleagues do, that they're about to send us yet another stimulus bill. And I think I hear the senator from Tennessee saying the single most important thing we could do to begin to jumpstart this economy would be to stop this job-killing health care bill.
There is no question. And return to certainty. The fact is that business people in this country, and I know that sometimes it's hard for the other side of the aisle to see this, but it's all about the cost of delivering goods. And secondly, understanding what the environment is going to be into the future. And this body has been so active, and this president so active, producing legislation that are job killers, number one, but also produce such uncertainty that they're afraid to hire. And that is, again, I know I've said this one, resoundingly, the number one reason that people are not hiring people on Main Street in our country. So I do hope that we stop this, because I do believe that this directly will kill jobs. But I also hope we will stop it, and the American people will see that we're working on things that save money and not things that cost money and take money out of businesses' pockets, out of Americans' pockets, which, by the way, that works hand in hand from the consumption standpoint. But this body just doesn't seem to have gotten that message yet. I'm feeling that a few of my friends on the other side of the aisle are greatly concerned, and I hope that, as the leader has said, we can stop this, but then work together on something that lowers cost so that businesses will actually have a desire to hire even more people. And I thank you for the time.
Well, I'd like to ask my colleague the question, because we're talking about a